At least 25 domestic terrorism cases have been opened by law enforcement following Wednesday's deadly siege on the U.S. Capitol. That's according to Colorado Democrat Congressman Jason Crow. Crow is a member of the U.S. Armed Services Committee. He was briefed on the matter by Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy. The FBI defines domestic terrorism as, quote, violent criminal acts committed by individuals and/or groups to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influences, such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. However, there is no single federal law that makes it a crime. This means prosecutors will have to rely on the entire criminal code to bring the rioters to justice. For more on this, let's bring in Ilya Shapiro. He is director of the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute. Ilya, thanks so much for being with us. As we mentioned, there is no single domestic terrorism statute. So how might prosecutors proceed?
Well, you don't need a specific statute to go after things like trespass or damaging federal property, threatening the lives of police officers. All of the mayhem, all of the destruction that was caused, the threats, the violence, all of those things are already illegal. And you don't need a specific new criminal statute when we have a very long federal criminal code to go after and prosecute to the full extent of the law and put in jail for a long, long time the people that perpetrated this violence.
Well, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has called on Vice President Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. Now, Mr. Pence has said nothing publicly, but there are reports he's preserving the option in case President Trump becomes more unstable. Now, explain how the 25th Amendment works and whether you think the vice president would actually consider it.
Yeah, I think this is a bit of political gamesmanship by the Speaker and the House Democratic leadership. If they think, and I agree, that what the president did was a serious and grave offense against the public trust, and they should impeach him. And I guess they're going to do that as kind of a backup. But the 25th Amendment is a separate thing, and I think is actually inappropriate. It removes, it gives the power to, if the vice president with a majority of the cabinet votes that the president is mentally or physical incapable or unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, then he is removed. Now, he can send another letter to Congress saying, no, I'm okay now, and then Congress has 21 days to debate that. But I don't think that's what's going on here. It's not that Donald Trump is suddenly, or as of Wednesday, became incapable of exercising the duties of his office. It's a judgment that he, whether you use the semantics don't matter, whether it's incitement or recklessly fomenting an atmosphere where his followers would charge or incite or cause an insurrection or a riot or what have you, violence against the Capitol. That, I think, is a sufficiently grave offense as to constitute a high crime and misdemeanor against the public trust that it's impeachable. And we'll see where that goes later this week, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so just elaborate, if you will, a little bit on that, because I'm wondering what your impression is of specifically that article that House Democrats have drafted with respect to impeachment.
I think it's probably accurate. I mean, a lot of people are criticizing this article for using the technical legal terms incitement and insurrection, because under the criminal law, it's a pretty high bar to criminally punish someone for inciting a riot, for inciting violence. The word insurrection means something that you can debate whether what the Capitol mob was doing was actually an insurrection against the government or not. But the semantics don't matter for purposes of an impeachment article. This is not the criminal law. We're not prosecuting and putting someone behind bars. This is about a breach of the public trust. And so giving speeches, misleading the public in a way that foments violence or can reasonably be expected to foment violence in a reckless manner, all of that, I think, for a public official is and can be an impeachable offense. And it takes a majority of the House to do that. And then to remove, it takes a 2/3 vote of the Senate. And there's an academic debate now about whether the conviction, the part of the process that goes to the Senate, takes place after Donald Trump is no longer president, whether it's still valid. I think probably it can, to achieve the important goal, presumably, of disqualifying him from further office.
Ilya, I also want to ask you about something that we're seeing. Some on the far right are saying that the siege on the Capitol will be used to strip Americans of their freedoms. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has asked the now outgoing acting director of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, to cancel all public gathering permits through January 24th in an attempt to secure the city for Inauguration Day. Does her request actually encroach on First Amendment rights?
Well, there's a couple of things here. More broadly, Elaine, what you began your question with, I think this is being used as a vehicle for doing a whole host of things that the opponents of Trump supporters, or just progressives, have wanted to accomplish for a long time, kicking President Trump off of Twitter. Now, this is not a First Amendment violation. Twitter is a private company, but taking various actions to silence or marginalize their political opponents, there's certainly a danger of that. Mayor Bowser's action, I mean, it's a judgment call. I mean, the reason why you need a permit to have mass gatherings is not because the First Amendment has less bite in the Capitol around the time of the inauguration. You can always have what are called time, place, and manner regulations of the exercise of the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly. I don't know whether you need to shut down all demonstrations in all of D.C. To accomplish the goal of securing the inauguration. I know National Guard troops are already being called up. I saw a number of like 15,000, something like that. So clearly the authorities are being prepared for any eventualities. But I don't know if a complete shutdown on the freedom of assembly is really what's necessary at this time.
Finally, Ilya, last week, Publishing House Simon & Schuster canceled a book deal with Republican Senator Josh Hawley over his objection to state electors and a photo that showed him raising his fist in support of those who were there. Although that photo was taken, we should note, before the violence actually broke out, as I understand it. And in any case, Senator Hawley responded to the decision on Twitter. And I want to go ahead and show what he said. He said, quote, "This is not just a contractual dispute. It's a direct assault on the First Amendment. This is the left looking to cancel everyone they don't approve of." Now, in an opinion piece for Newsweek, you say there are, quote, "real cultural pathologies that our society must grapple with, but that doesn't mean there's a role for government to fix these issues, and there's certainly not First Amendment violations." Explain what you mean there.
Sure. There are several layers of analysis here. First is the constitutional one, the First Amendment claim. Now, Simon & Schuster obviously is a private company, and nobody has the right to get their book published by a private company or to compel them to speak in some way. It's kind of a similar analysis to the Twitter banning of President Trump or anyone else. And Josh Hawley knows that. He's an experienced constitutional lawyer. He clerked at the Supreme Court. That's kind of political posturing. Now, as I learned in publishing my own book, Supreme Disorder, that you see behind me there, about the politics of the Supreme Court, publishers do have a lot of leeway for canceling contracts, deciding not to go ahead with the publication of someone's book for all sorts of reasons. It could be that Simon & Schuster is taking advantage of their contractual remedies. It could be that they have to pay Senator Hawley now, or it could be that he gets to keep his advance, all of those kinds of contractual arrangements. And it could be that Simon & Schuster is simply making the judgment, even if they have to pay him fully, that is a lesser cost than what would cost their reputation or how much it would otherwise cost to proceed with the publication of this book. So that's purely a contract law-based evaluation. And then the third layer is the cultural one. So there's something unsettling about big media companies, publishing houses, which tend to lean to the left, all deciding, say, at the same time that certain voices are beyond the pale. And we might not have a problem with that if what we're talking about is Holocaust denial or the KKK, Stalinism, these real ideas, people that propagate these ideas that might be a real threat to society. But it's all about moving what's called the Overton window of acceptable discussion. And probably Josh Hawley's book on on limiting the powers of the tech companies, I guess is take it as what he was going to write about, ironically or appropriately. Doesn't seem to be beyond the pale, but there really is a discussion for our society to be had about the proper scope and forums for political discussion. But it doesn't mean that the solution to that, the cultural pathology, as I said, is for the government to lay an antitrust action or otherwise regulate these companies further, because those who are most up in arms about Senator Hawley's book being canceled or the president being banned off Twitter, I'm sure they wouldn't like it anymore for, say, President Biden or eventually Kamala Harris to be the regulator of what can and can't and should be public. So these are deep cultural, social questions in a time when we're so polarized and there's such a high level of social distrust. It goes much deeper than contracts or legal cases.
All right, and I just want to mention Simon & Schuster was a division of Viacom-CBS, which was sold and in a transaction that is expected to close this year. All right, Ilya Shapiro. Ilya, thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care.